You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't.
Hi, listeners. I'm Altman Associates, host for this episode of the 15 Minutes Share Your Voice podcast, where we talk with top-notch law firms and attorneys about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing, delivering tailor-made services to help your law firm accomplish its objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and to make sure you're getting the best return on investment, your firm needs to have a better website and better content. Gladiator Law Marketing uses artificial intelligence, machine learning, and decades of experience to outperform the competition. To learn more, go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com, where you can schedule a free marketing consultation. Today's guest on the podcast is attorney Gary Altman. He is the founder and principal attorney of the estate planning law firm Altman Associates, which is a division of Frost Law. Gary has been practicing law and estate planning since 1980. As a trusted legal analyst, Gary has lent his expertise and authored articles for a wide range of media outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, and many more. Welcome to the podcast, Gary.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let me talk. My first question here is, can you tell us a little bit about Altman Associates and sort of what you guys do?
So we are an estate planning law firm or boutique where we work with individuals to transfer wealth to the next generation, minimizing taxes along the way, hassle, and making sure the inheritance is protected from bad things that could happen, such as divorces, lawsuits, and creditors.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit. What does estate planning mean? I mean, we've all heard that phrase. We've heard about, protecting our assets from taxes and other types of things that try to take them away. But let's just peel that back a little bit. Can you give us a little bit more?
So estate planning is listening to my clients, finding out what bothers them or what their family situation is like, and then determining what type of documents we need to draft and fund in order to accomplish their goals. So the most simplest way to think about it is, while you're alive, you need someone to make medical decisions for you if you can't, or financial decisions for you if you can't. So you draft a document that's called the power of attorney or a medical directive, so someone can do that for you. So the most important question in those documents is, who do you trust to make those decisions? Yeah. And then when someone dies, they should have a will in order to direct where their property goes. If they do not have a will, then the state has a will for you. So normally, if you die and you have no kids, your parents get your assets. If you have no parents, your siblings get your assets. That may be okay, or it may not be, depending on how you feel about your family. Then it gets more complicated or more comprehensive, so that people use other techniques to protect assets from creditors, protect your assets from your own creditors, or protect the assets you give away from the creditors of the person you give them to minimize maybe estate taxes. Now, that's not going to be a big thing for most people today. The amount that passes free of federal estate tax this year is $12,920,000 for an individual, or double that for a married couple. But on January 1st, 2026, that number is going to be cut in half. So a lot of planning is being done throughout the country and with my clients and others, and how to use up that exemption before it's cut in half. Okay. It also, sometimes planning will do to minimize income taxes. For instance, if someone owns a C corporation, there's a way in which they can sell that C corporation shares and avoid paying capital gains tax on the gain of the shares. That's called 1202 or qualified small business stock. And then there's other taxes that get involved in here. There's a gift tax. There's something called the generation skipping tax. So planning is sometimes avoiding or minimizing those taxes.
Yeah.
And then the most important thing is who's going to get your assets? Do you have a family that's everyone likes each other? Is your goal to make sure they're going to have Thanksgiving dinners after you're gone? Or do you not care about that? Or do your kids not get along? Or, I have clients who they haven't spoken to their children or one of their child in years.
Yeah.
Why would they give them any assets if the kid just said, I don't want to talk to you ever again? So
Yeah.
planning is all of that, listening and making sure the documents are in place. And then the second aspect is making sure your assets are coordinated with the documents. So I can have the greatest document in the world, but if my IRA beneficiary says give everything to my ex-wife, then she gets it and not my kids. So we have to make sure the beneficiary designations are correct, the assets are titled correctly.
Right. Right. Well, it sounds like a lot of stuff to kind of think about. And assets, people think about assets as, okay, it's my house and maybe my cars, maybe some IRA accounts, but it's really much larger than that, isn't it?
Well, financial assets are everything you own. So that includes cars, stuff in your house, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, IRAs, things like that. But some people go a little bit farther and think about assets is what they can give to their family in terms of advice and guidance and how they made the wealth and how they want their family to use the wealth after they're gone, somehow to create a legacy for themselves and their family.
Okay. And now what if someone owns a business? Does that make this whole thing more complicated?
Well, yes, it makes it more complicated, whether the business is selling widgets or real estate. The larger the business is, the more you're worried about liquidity when someone dies, because you have to have the money to pay the tax. So I'll give you a simple example. I have a client, and she's worth about $40 million, but she has multiple different interests in real estate ventures. And when she dies, we're going to have to pay about 20 million in tax, but we may not have enough liquidity to pay the tax.
Yeah.
So we have to plan to get the liquidity to pay the tax. Also, if you have a business and you have two kids, should they operate it equally or not? Okay. It's usually better for the patriarch or the matriarch to choose one child to be in charge. It doesn't usually work well when two or three people have equal authority.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I imagine that if I come to you and say, hey, look, I have a business and, I want to leave all my assets to my two kids. And then you've probably seen a lot of these examples where you can sort of give me some advice or suggestions about, well, maybe you don't want to leave the business 50-50 to both of them. Maybe you want to, like you said, make one of them in charge of something and maybe a different one in charge of something else. And that's okay to do.
Right.
So
Correct.
Right. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of battle scars where you can help people realize some of the complications involved if of what maybe they might be proposing.
So experience is really important. I mean, we've worked with probably 5,000 people over the last 30 years. And I am surprised once in a while by something I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
But almost everything comes back again. And the more you've done planning for the more people, the more you're able to give the better advice for the next person who comes in the door.
Yeah. Now, at what phase of someone's life is it important to start thinking about these things? I mean, I think most people think about it, okay, later in life, I'm getting into my 60s or 70s, I'm seeing the end of the runway, and people start to focus on this. Is that the right time, or should people start doing it earlier?
So planning is like insurance. It's protecting your family from a disaster. And recently, we have seen that play out in real life. A client's daughter was murdered a week ago
Oh my gosh.
by her husband, and he committed suicide, and they didn't have a will or any documents. And trying to navigate through that two families' grief, you're trying to grieve,
Right.
and now you have to deal with what's going to happen, and there's no guidance. And then I had it happen again last week where someone's twin brother died without any planning, and he was estranged from his mother. And the mother would be in charge and get everything instead of his twin brother, who they basically, So when should you do this? I think you need to do it as soon as you can, even if it's simple. That guy who had a twin brother, he was 40
Yeah.
years old. He could have done a will that said, I leave everything to my brother, period.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be expensive or long, but it has to be something. So we like to say you should plan early and plan often. And it's a continuing process. It's not a product. And it evolves as your family life evolves, as your assets evolve, as you evolve.
I see. So I think the other thing I just heard you say is this notion of, okay, if I called you up and we sat down and we drew up these papers, then periodically, or whenever there's a change in the situation in my life, it's time to revisit it and to make sure that that's still what we wrote down 5 years ago still makes sense.
That's correct. Correct. And the laws change, both tax laws and state laws regarding trust, regarding wills, regarding powers of attorney. So you need to keep your documents up to date. Sometimes clients ask me as to what's changed or why do I need to do so? And my answer usually is, I can't tell you if it's going to make a difference, but if it didn't make a difference and we didn't update it, then it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there sort of a financial number, a value of assets where this starts making sense to do, and below that it really doesn't matter, or is it important in almost any case?
Obviously, if you had $10,000, it may not be very important, but it may be important to you. So it's more in the eye of the beholder rather than my eye. Our practice is pretty high net worth. So we don't see a lot of people with assets under a couple $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a couple of clients who don't have a lot, but they have children with special needs.
Yeah.
And so even though you don't have a lot, you want to make sure it's going to be used appropriately.
Excellent point.
After you die.
Yeah, because back to one of your original statements was, if you don't have some of these documents, then the state is going to decide where these things go, which
Correct.
may not be to your kids or to your best interest.
That is correct. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So that's a great point. I haven't thought about that before, that even individuals who may not think they have a lot of assets, well, I don't have to worry about that. I know that when I leave this world, it's not going to get taxed because it's below that magic number, but that's just one part of it.
Right.
It's sort of making sure that things that you want to see happen once you're gone.
That's absolutely correct.
Now, how do sort of gifts to charitable organizations play into this?
Well, if someone has some charitable intent, then they can use that intent while they're alive to give stuff to charity and minimize tax. The simplest way to think about that is you give appreciated stock to your favorite charity.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's something called a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA. When you reach a certain age, you're able to give your required minimum distribution to charity instead of taking it yourself. You don't get a deduction, but you don't pay the tax. And the reason why that's important is a lot of the provisions in our tax laws are based upon your income. So if you give away your IRA after you receive it, you've got the income, and then maybe your Social Security will be taxed. But if you give it away before you get it, it's not in your income, and maybe your Social Security will not be taxed.
Ah,
And then there are certain types of planning techniques we can use that will minimize your estate tax or income tax, but still provide benefits to your family.
got it. Got it. Now, is every state different because of their tax laws are different when it comes to these types of matters?
So every state is different for probably a couple different reasons. First off, there are 3 different property regimes in this country. Most of the country is what's called a common law regime, which means you can control where your assets go, and there's no
Mhm.
real law about it. Louisiana is the old French code. And so there they have, it actually tells you who has to get your assets. There's ways to override it, but it's more difficult. And then there's something called community property states like California, Texas, and about 9 others. And there they basically say every asset you make while you're married is owned equally, but individually. So each one owns half of every asset earned while married. Then there are states that have their own estate tax or an inheritance tax. Pretty much, if you look, you go from Washington, D.C., north, and then a little bit west, all along the top of the country. Those states have maybe most of those have a tax, either inheritance tax or estate tax. But when you go south of Washington, D.C., and then you follow west and keep going south, they don't have an estate tax.
Huh.
Okay.
Okay.
And then there are different laws regarding probate, which is how people pass that, how you transfer assets at death. Different laws regarding asset protection for your own self. Yeah, different laws regarding how trusts will be administered and what you have to do with trusts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then every state has a different law or custom regarding powers of attorney and medical directives, so that if someone signs one in Washington, D.C., or Maryland or Virginia, the 3 states I usually practice in, and then they move to Colorado, the document's still valid, but they may not recognize it in Colorado. So it may not be effective, even though it's valid.
Mhm. So I'm not sure I totally understand that subtlety of
It's very subtle. So Maryland, for instance, has a statutory form for its power of attorney. If you were in New York and then you move to Maryland, in New York, they have what's called a short form power of attorney, where you just basically, it's 1 page, you check boxes because the state law says what those boxes mean. That document's valid.
Got it.
Okay. You move to Maryland and you take that power of attorney form to your local, to a bank here, they're going to look at it and say, I don't know what this means. So I'm not going to, I can't
Honor it.
I can't honor it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Florida has a totally different medical directive than Maryland. Okay. So again, if you had the Maryland when you went to Florida, it's not as comprehensive as the Florida one. Florida has what's called a standby guardianship. Maryland does not. So there are subtleties in these states that need to be taken care of when you move to a different state.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it just reinforces the whole point of you really need a person who specializes in this area because you have to understand all these things, and maybe your general practitioner may not understand all of these issues, and you're going to end up in a place where you're going to be surprised, possibly.
Yes, that is what I believe.
Yeah, excellent. So let's talk a little bit and switch gears here. Let's talk a little bit about why you started the firm.
So why I started my firm was because planning or estate planning in most law firms is not respected or given its due. It is not a high profit area. And it's more intensive work in many ways than other areas of the law. You have to know a little bit about everything to be a really good estate planning attorney. And it's very time intensive to do it correctly. So I went to a law firm, and I hoping that I would be able to have a practice inside of a firm that did other things. It didn't work out. And so I decided I needed to leave. And the best option was opening my own firm. And I did that on September 1st, 1996. In essence, I started with myself and one assistant. Next, in 1997, I hired a lawyer to help me. And that attorney base is still with me now. And we just grew slowly every year. Just trying to do the right thing for each client, trying to make sure that we followed up with each client and that the little details got taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what you said just now about, doing what's right for each client, taking care of the little details is probably, I can imagine, one of the things that distinguishes you from the other law firms that are in this practice area.
Distinguishes, yes, it absolutely does. In most estate planning attorneys get maybe enough work for themselves and one assistant. Okay. We, through the way we do things, and granted it's referred to me, but it's really referred to all of us, because I couldn't have done what I do without the support and the knowledge and expertise of the folks who work with me. But I basically generate or bring in enough work for 5 attorneys. And I think that's because we try to do the right thing for everyone. We don't overcharge. We respond quickly to our clients' needs and concerns. And we work closely with our clients' other advisors, whether they're CPAs or financial advisors or insurance agents. And we don't have any ego about what we do, because if someone has a better idea, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Now, how do you find clients? How do they kind of come into the firm?
So, a long time ago, I had a lunch with a financial advisor. And that financial advisor was older than me, though if I think about it now, he was probably younger than I am now. And he was very blunt, and he said, that he had a great practice, had lots of clients, and then he just sat back. And now, 10 years later, he realized he had to go back out and try to get clients because his clients either moved or died.
Yeah.
So I realized from that conversation that I can never stop marketing or meeting new people. So I spend a large part of my day or life meeting with folks who can refer me business, or I can use them for my clients. And so I do a lot of business development or networking. I do that in many different ways. But I also realize that it doesn't work if I meet a new financial advisor and I say, hey, you need to refer your clients to me because I'm the best. That's not the way it works.
Right.
You have to get a relationship with people. You're going to refer business or clients to folks who you trust and who you like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? So the best way to think about that is I joined an organization 1990. Yeah, that's about right. It was a financial planning organization. I had gotten my what's called certified financial planning designation years prior. I don't do any of that, but I had the designation. So I joined the board and I just met people and I just became a resource for them. If someone would call me up and say, I have this client, what would you do? I'd tell them. Or I saw this document, it doesn't look right. Can you look at it? Sure. Okay. I helped people. And over the years, some of those folks became good friends of mine. Some of them referred me business. I don't know. I get clients today from folks I've never met because they've heard my name from someone else. I get clients from folks who I've known for years. I like to tell 3 years ago, a CPA I've known for 30 years calls me up and says, I have a client. I'd like you to meet them because they need someone like you. This CPA had never referred anyone to me, ever. That client accounted for 5% of my revenue the next year.
Wow.
So I always think you have to be kind to people. You have to always respond to them. I think 95% of networking is showing up and just being seen and known.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, those are some great thoughts. Great thoughts, Gary. Thank you so much for sharing that with our audience. So let me ask you one other question here before we start wrapping up. If you were giving some advice to, let's say you were giving a graduation talk at a law school graduation, a commencement talk, or you were giving advice to an attorney who's maybe been out practicing a couple of years, what advice would you give them?
One, find the smartest person you know in the area in which you work with and get to know that person. So you can have someone you can ask questions of. Okay, that could be someone in your firm or someone not in your firm.
Mm-hmm.
2, realize that if you have clients, if you can generate clients, you control your life. If you can't generate clients, you have no control. So you need to learn how to generate clients on your own so you have control. And you're going to do that in the ways that you feel good. So whatever you're passionate about, you can be passionate about playing tennis, okay? Well, go play tennis with everyone you can. Get to know them. You'll get business from it. If you want to, if you like, if you want to have charitable, go join a charitable board. Meet people. You'll get business from it. Don't ask for the business. They'll just get to know you.
Right.
When you go on vacation, talk to people. Okay? When you will go into a store, talk to people. Join a committee in the local bar association. Meet other lawyers. Okay? Lawyers are the great referral sources because if they don't do what you do, then they need someone because they're going to have a client and they're going to want to refer to someone who isn't going to compete with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if I know people who have joined organizations like heating and cooling organizations. They don't do that, but if they're there, they're there. They
Right.
get to know you.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So, and then be the best you can.
Yeah.
It's not about making money tomorrow. It's about doing the right thing you can for every client. If you do the right thing and you do it well, clients will come.
Excellent. Excellent advice, Gary. So where can listeners find out more about Altman Associates? Where's the best place
So we
for
have
them
a
to go?
website. It's altmanassociates.net. And there's also askforus.com. Those are the 2 easiest ways. I also have a Twitter account where we post stuff and LinkedIn, and people can find me in both of those also.
Great. Well, we'll make sure all of that information is in the show notes. Now, Gary, is there something that I have not asked you that you'd like to share with our audience?
Wow, that's a good question. You've been very thorough, but you didn't ask me if I like what I do.
Well, I can just sort of tell you you like what you do, right? I can see it in your face.
So that's the other thing. I think you got to be passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
If it's a passion, it does, you wake up in the morning, you want to go do it. Okay. I don't like the business of law, but I love practicing law.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, hey, Gary, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.